Hello, hello. This is the My Artifact episode number 3657. Today's date is October 25, 2025. It's been almost like morning at 9:29 a.m. All right. Okay. So from last couple of days, I was not actually recording Artifact. From last couple of days, I was not actually kind of like doing the things that I usually do every single day. From last couple of days, I was not actually kind of like doing any brain workout or any kind of like something like the Duolingo, Elevate, nothing really at all. From last 2 days, my like entire schedule is little disturbed, and it's very hard. Like basically, it's this thing that it's still not get in line. Like basically, it's this thing na ki since the Diwali that actually started, there is a lot of like first of all is that one of my friend has a wedding on this Diwali. Okay, yeah. By the way, Diwali is okay. Let me give you the context. What exactly happened so that you might gonna understand. Let me open up the calendar so that I would kind of like give you exact. Okay, so where was Diwali? Actually, Diwali was Govardhan Puja 21. Okay, 20. Okay, 19. All right. So it's actually started from actually 19th of October 2025. Okay, yeah. One of my friend has a wedding at 20 22. Mm-hmm. Probably 23. Yeah. Okay. What exactly is this thing? Yeah. Why are you kind of like somebody so busy that you don't really have any time or things like that? What is actually the reason for that? Like basically, first of all, is that ki Diwali. Okay, yeah. uh, because of the Deepavali, all my friends are gathered at home. Okay, but not just for the Deepavali. It is also because of kind of like a something two reasons. Okay, first reason is that one of my friend has a wedding. Okay, yeah, and other friend has an engagement. Okay, yeah, one of my friend wedding as a 23 of October, and the engagement at 25 October. 25 October. That means today. Okay, yeah, and because of these two events are actually happening in the group, so most of people are actually gather at home. Okay, gather at hometown. Now because of this thing, everyone is actually gathered at hometown. So because of this thing, uh, plans are made up and we are kind of like decided to go somewhere else, there and things like that. Okay, yeah. uh, it is also really essential for me to spend some sort of time with them. Okay, yeah, because it matter. Okay, yeah, like basically it's this thing that it is really essential to have when you have that particular event, then probably you have to spend time. Okay, if I'm gonna say event, like basically if I'm say wedding and engagement, this is not just an event. Okay, like basically if I'm gonna say wedding, so wedding is a cluster of event. Okay, there is a haldi, there is a sangeet, there is a lot of stuff. Okay, actually involved in there, and after that there is a kind of like some people talk about kind of like a things happen and things happen and things happen, so something like that, which is also really even more fun too. Okay, yeah. So basically, I'm belong to the India, by the way, and this is all this actually happen in India. And in India, wedding festival is considered as a kind of like a festival. Okay, yeah, yeah, it's a festival. It's not just a kind of like simply one event you just come and go. No, it's kind of like a simply event of kind of like a multiple days and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, and we had a lot of fun. It was really good. It was really great. Okay, yeah. I dance, I went to swimming pool, I went to like basically we just do a lot of take photos and stuff, and it was really good and stuff like that. Oh yeah. Now because of this thing, I just cannot kind of like only focus on kind of like a assembly work that I do. Okay, one of the really essential thing is that my content creation. Okay, yeah. I usually make sure that I should supposed to be upload my content in advance. Okay, yeah. So like basically it's this thing, if I'm kind of like uploading my content tomorrow, then I'm gonna make sure that my content should supposed to be kind of like assembly upload on today, so that tomorrow I will be kind of like simply schedule in advance. I'm kind of like simply schedule this thing. So probably I'm not really worried about that content creation and things like that, because I already created this thing. So I need at least like a kind of like simply 3 days of advance. Okay, yeah. Like basically it's this thing that if I'm kind of like uploading my content, if I'm kind of like making my content today, then I should supposed to be upload that content, like that piece of content should supposed to be went public after the 3 days. Okay, so I'm actually literally focused on kind of like only 3 days of advance. Now 3 days of advance is kind of like something broken is because of this happened. Okay, because of the wedding and things, I cannot able to kind of like simply create my content. Okay, yeah. Now this is the one thing. Another thing is that ki artifact. Yes, I did record artifact yesterday, and yes, I did not record artifact. Like basically, this is I usually record artifact twice in a day, like in the morning and in the evening. But because of kind of like a some kind of like a hectic things and all those stuff and stuff like that, I just like I'm kind of like a recording artifact like a once, like basically yesterday I kind of like a record in the morning. Yes, last night I didn't really record, and as well as kind of like a day after that didn't really record. So like not actually recording artifact, like basically recording only just yeah, but it's artifact is also okay. Yeah, it's not really that kind of like a matter. It's not really affecting. Another thing is actually more affecting my brain training. Usually I spend almost like a 1 hour in kind of like a something app development and kind of like a something brain workout, like a basically Elevate. These are kind of like some application that I use. Lumosity, Elevate, Duolingo, okay, Brilliant. These are kind of like some application that I use every single day. I kind of like only solve some sort of kind of like equations and kind of like solve some sort of puzzles into this particular application, which kind of like leads me to kind of like a something even more little bit of making smart. Okay, yeah. I spend almost like maybe half an hour into this application, but because of this thing I cannot doing this thing. Like basically it's this thing that my Duolingo application is kind of like sending me a lot of kind of like a notification that key, why are you not doing training and this and that and that and that. I'm just kind of like ignoring that stuff. Okay, yeah. Another thing is that key kind of like assembly I'm literally focused on writing my books too. Okay, yeah. Like basically I'm kind of like writing my world history book, and the other thing is artifact and stuff like that. And basically a couple of days ago I was kind of like simply realized that I just kind of like made a book. Okay, I upload those books on Amazon, but probably I didn't really kind of like simply make those books in kind of like simply a professional way. Means like that ki kind of like simply that ki a professional writer, the way that professional writer makes the book, I didn't really make it that book. Okay, yeah. Like the formatting and things like that, I didn't really make it. I just kind of like put the material and that's it. Now I have to kind of like change the entire material into the kind of like systematic professional kind of like something the book, so that people might gonna read and stuff and like that. So this is also kind of like a problem too. Okay, yeah. And I have a lot of material, like literally almost like a 37 edition of artifact episode, 37 books. Each book is almost like a roughly average almost like a 300 pages. I don't know how do I supposed to do that. And then after that, my world history series, and there are rest of the kind of like something the books that I kind of like assembly. I kind of like create the blueprint. I didn't really kind of like write those books. It's just like that, na ki. And this basically this thing I'm writing this like basically I love to write those books. It's kind of like a really good like a basically just like that, na ki. Usually, what is actually my day schedule is that like basically I'm not kind of like writing this book for kind of like some people could read and stuff like that. Yes, people could read it. That is also really okay. But one of the really essential thing, like one of the like main important thing why I'm kind of like creating this book is because of that I wanted to read. Yeah, like basically my first perspective is that why I'm kind of like writing this book. That's is because of I wanted to read my books. I wanted to read book. Okay, yeah. Like why like there are a bunch of kind of like books that actually exist. Yeah, I knew that there are a bunch of books that actually exist, but probably is this thing na ki I'm not actually connecting with other books. Okay, yeah. And like basically is this thing na ki like let me tell you one thing. This year I kind of like started reading books. Okay, yeah. This year means like 2025. Okay, yeah. Before that I haven't really read any kind of like a book. Nothing really at all. Legitly nothing. Okay, yeah. I just kind of like simply read maybe textbooks according to the syllabus and things like that, and haven't really read any kind of like some book. So I was not really aware of that, what kind of like assembly books is written and what kind of like a language they kind of like speaks and things like that. I was not know anything at all. Okay, yeah. So first of all, it is really essential to me to kind of like become a reader first. Okay, yeah. Now, if I wanted to read any kind of like a book, I need a kind of like a language that kind of like a I was familiarized. So that's why I'm kind of like a writing this artifact book. Okay, artifact book is kind of like a really good because the way that I'm kind of like recording this artifact, I'm kind of like convert this audio into kind of like a text document. I'm kind of like reading that text document, which is kind of like a far more kind of like a easily consumable because the every word that I say is exactly every word that I'm reading. Okay, yeah. And this kind of like is very much familiar, as well as there is a I'm living in AI world, artificial intelligence, and I'm kind of like making my books is far more kind of like interesting, like make it engaging, make it kind of like a fun, make it kind of like assembly is this thing. I put all those kind of like assembly the attribute so that all the paragraphs makes kind of like assembly really fun way to kind of like read and stuff like that. I'm kind of like reading that and it's really good, it's really great. Okay, yeah. So yeah, I'm kind of like reading a book and I'm kind of like set a kind of like a habit that I should supposed to be read book for half an hour. Okay, yeah. And I'm kind of like I'm kind of like making sure that I should supposed to be read my book half an hour. Right now I'm not really consistent regarding about that because of that we kind of like a lot of kind of like problems and things and one thing led to another and stuff like that, and probably it's just that key specifically taking that much kind of like time and stuff like that. So basically is this thing na ki, as I mentioned, I was kind of like somebody busy on all those events and weddings and stuff like that. I'm not able to kind of like read my books. Okay, yeah. Yesterday I kind of like wanted to read my book, but unfortunately I realized that dude, I haven't really been my content because content is one of the really essential thing. Okay, yeah. Another thing is app development. Okay, literally just like that, Nick, I was kind of like simply making my application. Okay, yeah. Not artifact application, no, I'm kind of like somebody like basically I'm very much beginner. Okay, I'm kind of like somebody learning all those kind of like somebody app development that I'm kind of like learning. I'm kind of like utilizing this thing in kind of like how do I supposed to kind of like intent and how do I supposed to kind of like something the on set click listener वगैरह. I'm kind of like somebody learning all those kind of like stuff and stuff. Okay, so that I would kind of like something learn and things like that. Okay, yeah. I haven't really done from last 2-3 days app development is haven't really touched like basically from 2-3 days I haven't really kind of like somebody learn any kind of like app development, nothing really at all. So this is all those fucked up shit happened, dude, and because of this thing I just like basically just like I'm like, am I busy? But kind of like something is this thing that key my situation is won't let me busy because let me tell you one thing, I have a lot of work and I just what I want is that I just wanted to sit in front of my desk and start doing my work. But the problem is that today we have engagement. Okay, one of my friend has an engagement, so I have to go there. Another thing is that my family relatives has a wedding today too. Okay, yeah, and I have to be kind of like somebody bring my mother to that particular wedding. So I have to be managed that should I supposed to go to the my family from this kind of like a family wedding, or should I went to kind of like my friend engagement. It's kind of like somebody that like basically I'm kind of like somebody is in seesaw, where should I supposed to go. Okay, yeah, I have to figure it out that regard. I have to figure it out this thing like basically it's really essential to me to go into the kind of like a friend engagement. But another thing is that I should supposed to bring my mother into the wedding too. I don't know how I'm supposed to do that thing. Okay, yeah. And after all those stuff, I'm kind of like losing all those stuff. Like basically this thing today, I haven't really done any kind of like content. Like basically for today, there is no content for upload. Okay, yeah. Like this morning I wake up and kind of like I make my content. Okay, I haven't really done, by the way, I just kind of like done my design. I haven't really kind of like make that reel. After this artifact episode, I have to be make this reel and I have to be kind of like somebody upload that reel as soon as possible as it can. Okay, yeah, so that I might kind of like somebody free for rest of the day. Okay, for today. And then tomorrow there is another grind. Okay, yeah. So what exactly is this thing? How do you supposed to kind of like handle this situation? What is exactly your schedule? What exactly is this thing? How do you supposed to execute this particular like how? Yeah. Well, my plan is that yes, today is kind of like it's only busy. Yes, today I have wedding and today I have engagement too. So my plan is that after this artifact episode, I have to be kind of like a done my reel. Okay, yeah. I have to make that reel. Like basically, the reel is kind of like a very much easy. It's not really that kind of like a reel. It's really hard. It really required me almost like a 1 hour to make that reel. Okay, after I make that reel, okay, yeah. Then one thing is that I have to be kind of like somebody go to the engagement. Like it's been almost like a 9:44. Okay, yeah. And within an hour, that means like basically 10:44 or maybe 11. Okay, yeah. And 11:30, I have to go to the kind of like something the engagement or kind of like some video. I'm not really sure about that, but I have to figure it out. Okay, then rest of the day will kind of like we spend over there too, because I might not get have time and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Then at the evening, what I have to do is that probably I might have kind of like a free time, but I'm not really sure about that. Okay, workout is also really essential too, and I can't really afford to kind of like lose the consistency, because yeah, like if I didn't really went to workout, then probably just like I'm kind of like completely broke. Okay, yeah. So workout is almost essential for me too, but creating content is also really essential for me too. Reading a books is also really essential for me too, and kind of like a brain training is also really essential for me too. App development is also really essential for me too. Everything is kind of like something very much essential, and I just have to kind of like suddenly piece all those stuff that where should I supposed to put it, so that I would kind of like do this work today, and then probably yeah. So what is like, let's just focus on utmost really essential work. Okay, yeah. One of the utmost essential work is the content creation. So basically is this thing na ki after this artifact episode, make your reel, upload that reel. Okay, done. Then rest of the day you might gonna kind of like it's only busy, so let's get busy. Okay, yeah. Regarding about wedding and engagement and stuff like that. Now at the evening, like basically you have to go to the workout, so go to the workout, run, play badminton, stuff like that. Came home, okay, yeah. And after you came home, you have to be kind of like assembly record the artifact. Probably this thing entire day you might not gonna do. Basically this thing you have to play Duolingo or kind of like assembly. Like basically this thing in the wedding or in the kind of like assembly engagement, you might have get time, so that play this thing like basically Duolingo and Elevate and Brilliant. These are kind of like assembly micro learning. So do that thing in the wedding, so that you kind of like attend the wedding as well as kind of like do the brain workout and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Don't read the book today, and another thing is that don't do any kind of like app development today too. Okay, yeah. We make sure that we're gonna do this tomorrow. Okay, yeah. And another thing is that tomorrow is also really another grind, is that I have to make sure that I have to be kind of like somebody make a lead in this app, make a lead in this kind of like content creation. I want that my content, it should supposed to be uploaded in advance. Okay, at least 3 days of advance. Okay, I want this kind of like a 3 days of lead. So for this particular thing, I have to be sacrifice some sort of stuff. Might be a kind of like a app development. App development is always the one thing that I always sacrifice. Really, always sacrifice. Okay, yeah. But I have to do this thing, and let's figure it out. All right. It's been almost like a 17 minute. I'm kind of like I wanted to kind of like somebody record my artifact. So let's just like ask the bunch of questions first, okay, and kind of like a wrap up as quickly as possible. All right, okay. All right. Question is, what if industrial revolution happened in Africa first? Oh, okay. That's a really good question. Okay, first of all, what exactly is this question, and why am I asking this question to myself? This is what if question. Why am I asking? What if question is always really interested way to give the answer. It's kind of like a force you to think about that reality and create that reality inside your mind and inside your create that reality. Now the reality is actually depend on how much detailed knowledge that you have. Okay, yeah. So it kind of like a force me to think about that knowledge and stuff like that. I don't know, but kind of like a what if question is kind of like a really interested way to give the answer. It's kind of like a somebody that it push my brain to create that reality, create that kind of like some knowledge or whatever it is. Okay, yeah. I don't know how I'm supposed to describe, but it's kind of like I loving this thing. Okay, yeah. So that's why I'm kind of like asking this question to myself. Disclaimer: the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either. You actually understand this thing because I'm kind of like simply telling the information that inside of my head, and probably the information that I have inside of my head is not exactly right or is not exactly wrong either too. It's just my opinion because it's unfiltered. It's nothing really at all. Okay, yeah. It's completely unfiltered. So it is kind of like a be advice, and don't take this information very kind of like correctly or things like that. Okay, yeah. It's just I'm kind of like expressing my thoughts and opinion. Okay, yeah. If you need any kind of like information, you have internet, you have all those things. You just have to go there and check it out. All right, yeah. In this particular artifact, I'm just kind of like simply expressing my opinion regarding about this particular fact. All right, let's go. Let's proceed. All right, yeah. Now the question is that, wait, the rain is actually started. I have to sit here. All right, yeah. Okay, this is good. Okay, the question is that what if the industrial revolution happened Africa instead of Europe? Okay, industrial revolution. Well, first of all, will it gonna happen? Like, is it possible to kind of like a happen industrial revolution in Africa? Well, like instead of I'm kind of like putting my judgment, I'm kind of like a give you a scenario that you might understand what is actually my perspective on what is actually I wanted to tell you. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I don't know who you are and I don't know where are you live. Okay, yeah. But if you are living in kind of like some Europe, okay, yeah, you are like the weather in Europe is really pleasant, always really good. It's not really that harsh sunlight. It's not really that harsh cold winter. Like there is a cold winter. It's not really that like there is not cold winter, but like basically this thing, the Europe weather is very much really good for as a human point of perspective. Okay, yeah. Like I'm gonna give you the simple example. Okay, yeah. If you are living in India or Africa or US or any part of the world, okay, yeah, what is actually time of the day where light is so much bright? Mostly in afternoon, na? Mostly in afternoon. And in the afternoon, we try to avoid to go into the sun and things like that because it was so much harsh sunlight. Okay, yeah. European people might not understand this thing. They think that the sunlight is really good and things and stuff like that. Is because of that they haven't really get that much sunlight. Okay, because Europe is kind of like a something in upmost north part of globe, so probably they don't really get the sunlight that much, and they are getting sunlight very less as compared to the countries who are actually in equator. Okay, like basically I'm from India. Okay, yeah, and sunlight are here are very harsh, like legitly very harsh. Okay, yeah, I cannot go outside afternoon at almost like a 11 to 4. Okay, 11 a.m. to 4 p.m. It was like a really harsh sunlight. Okay, I'm just talking about the normal day. If I talk about the summer, oh my god, like it was like a fucking hot, legitly hot. Okay, yeah. Now it goes to kind of like it's same situation at the kind of like a some Middle East, Africa, or kind of like a something that ki the Turkey or any kind of like a something the South American countries. Okay, yeah. And as well as kind of like assembly Indonesia and other parts of too. Okay, probably the Australia too. Okay, yeah, because it was so much harsh sunlight. Okay, yeah, and probably this thing those people might gonna resonate with me is that okay, during the afternoon we try to avoid go outside because it was so much harsh sunlight and probably we are like basically we cannot go. Okay, and this is what kind of like only human mentality is this thing. But let me give you another perspective. Okay, yeah, if there is a cold winter. Okay, yeah, not the cold winter that I'm kind of like basically I'm kind of like a thinking that probably almost like a 5 degree to 10 degree or maybe kind of like a some 5 degree 10 degrees kind of like a pleasant weather. Okay, yeah, you can go and you can do work and it was really good. Like basically is this what is actually is this thing what I'm trying to tell you is this thing for a human kind of like a perspective, like I am a human, you are a human. Okay, yeah, we are really good at kind of like assembly, like we feel really good with kind of like assembly some sort of particular temperature. Like let me tell you one thing. Okay, yeah, our body like basically our mind, I don't know regarding about body, but our mind feels really good when we get kind of like a little bit cold weather. If it get too much like a basically just say like a minus, like a zero from like a basically 0 to kind of like a something minus and things like that, it went to kind of like a really horrible cold, then probably it is not really good weather. Okay, but probably is this thing from 5 degrees Celsius to 10 degrees Celsius, this is kind of like a very pleasant weather. Okay, and in this pleasant weather we actually kind of like a go outside, go outing and go kind of like a do the all the stuff and things like that. Okay, yeah, got it. But in the harsh sunlight we try to avoid that particular stuff, right? We try to avoid that particular stuff. Okay, are you agree this thing or not? Okay, yeah, European people might not agree with this thing because I already explained the kind of like some reason, but probably almost like the people who are kind of like somebody living outside the Europe, like basically Australia, India, or any kind of like some Middle East or kind of like some South American country or maybe American country too, they also kind of like feels that ki harsh sunlight is kind of like a somebody very much. Like basically it's this thing that ki we try to avoid. It's not really that ki we can't go. Yeah, if there is kind of like a somebody work that we could go, but it's just like we try to avoid. It's not really very pleasant weather that we should supposed to go. Like basically is it, first of all, let me give you my point of perspective. I don't know, you might gonna resonate this thing or not. I'm living in India. Okay, yeah. If I went outside, okay, yeah, I try to avoid go to outside in the kind of like a harsh weather or things like harsh kind of like a sunlight or things like that. Why? Because it was so hot. Another thing is that if I went there, I'm living in India, so much pollution. By God, like literally so much pollution. One thing. Another thing, sunlight is very harsh. There is a sweat came all around the body. From armpits to every kind of like a things, and you just like you don't really feel that good. Okay. And another thing, it creates tan. And basically it's this thing that na ki I don't know, it's not really kind of like a something pleasant weather. I don't really feel really good to kind of like a go. But if I have some sort of work, obviously I have to go. It's not really that key. I don't really have a choice. I have to go there and kind of like a do that thing. You are human, I am a human. We are kind of like connecting this dot at the moment that we are not really good at kind of like somebody go do work at the harsh sunlight. Okay, yeah. This is what exactly the same story in the Africa. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing, if I'm kind of like consider that the industrial revolution is actually happened in Africa, in every possible way, it is not possible. Okay, yeah. Because let me tell you one thing, the industrial revolution should supposed to be happen if the Renaissance is happened. Like basically this thing that ki industrial like Renaissance era and industrial revolution are actually so connected to each other. Most of the innovation is actually started in Renaissance. Renaissance is an era, by the way. It's not a place, it's an era. Okay, yeah. It's actually called since kind of like assembly 1400th century to kind of like 1800th century. These are kind of like a time that called Renaissance era. And specifically the Renaissance era is actually mostly focused on kind of like a something the European region. Okay, it's not really associated with a kind of like another part of religion, because in the European people in the Renaissance era, people are kind of like so much evolved in every possible way, like painting, sculpturing, innovation, and stuff like that. These are kind of like a creates industrial revolution. This creates a kind of like a somebody the fertile land to create innovation. Okay, and industrial revolution. Then industrial revolution actually started in Europe. Okay, yeah. In Africa, it's not really possible because first of all is that there is no people at all. Like let me tell you one thing that ki kind of like somebody the early civilization, the early humans actually born in Africa. But the problem is that ki Africa is not really fertile land to kind of like somebody go and kind of like things like that. Like basically the South Africa is a little bit fertile land. Okay, yeah. But most of the kind of like Africa is kind of like a somebody in on the equator. Okay, yeah, like basically there is a Sahara desert and kind of like a things which is not really habitat for kind of like a human went and kind of like a somebody settle their civilization. It's not really possible because the temperature is almost like a 40 degrees Celsius or more than that. Okay, yeah. So most of the humans are kind of like a born in Africa or things like that, but their civilization actually went from Africa to another part of the world, Europe, India, or China, or kind of like a somebody America and things like that. Because of the African environment is very much harsh. It's not really able for kind of like a human to kind of like a settle their civilization and things like that. Okay, because as I mentioned earlier, if I cannot like basically my mind is not ready to kind of like go outside at the very harsh sunlight. So basically, if I'm not going, then probably how does kind of like some people are kind of like how do I supposed to expect that people are kind of like assembly go outside and kind of like do their work and things like that. Like basically this thing, Renaissance is kind of like assembly happen is because of the multiple people are gathered and kind of like sharing their information regarding about stuff and stuff. If the people are not really come out and stuff like that, they are not sharing their information, how does kind of like assembly Renaissance will kind of like assembly start? And if the Renaissance era will not kind of like assembly establish, then how does industrial revolution is gonna establish? In every possible way, Africa is not really fertile land for kind of like leading the innovation, things like that. Okay, I'm trying to tell you from a 100-year point of perspective. Okay, like basically in 1800th century, stuff like that. In today's world, Africa is actually a bit more growing. Like people are kind of like Africa are kind of like so much stronger. They are kind of like create its own union, and they are kind of like understand this thing that we are leading to kind of like a better future and stuff like that. But I'm trying to tell you from 1800th century point of perspective. At that time, Africa is not really fertile land for kind of like leading the Renaissance and kind of like some innovations and stuff like that, and not really fertile for innovation, kind of like a industrial revolution. It's possibly just like the possibility of happening industrial revolution in Africa is like probably maybe kind of like a somebody North Africa, or maybe kind of like a somebody the Africa which is actually connected to Middle East, maybe kind of like Egypt part of region, but still it's not. Okay, yeah, there is some sort of kind of like ancient civilization or kind of like a somebody evolved in Africa, but still those are kind of like some innovation, like those are kind of like some civilization are actually established near the Nile River. Okay, yeah, because Nile River is kind of like some life. Okay, yeah, and most of the early civilization actually established in kind of like a somebody beyond like a on kind of like a river side. Okay, yeah, like basically Indus Valley civilization are actually based on Indus River. Okay, yeah, the Egyptian civilization actually based on Nile River. Okay, yeah, Chinese civilization actually based on Yellow River. Okay, so these are kind of like some civilization are actually established in kind of like assembly because of the river and things like that, because river actually giving them a lifeline. Okay, yeah, but like basically if I'm kind of like looking at the Africa, so like if you if you don't want to trust me, what you have to do is that open your Google map. Okay, yeah, turn into the satellite mode. Okay, yeah, zoom out and kind of like a search to the Nile River. Okay, yeah, you might see a lot of green things in the near to the Nile River. Okay, like basically left and right side, but rest of the kind of like Africa is kind of like a bit really yellow and things like that. Okay, yeah, why is that thing? Is because of that Nile River is kind of like a giving them a kind of like a some opportunity to civilize or kind of like a stuff like that. But the entire weather of the Africa is very harsh and things like that, so which is not really good for settlement for human civilization. So that's why very less people are actually exist in Africa. Okay, yeah. I'm talking about 1800th century. If you are talking about today's world, then probably the Nigeria is one of the kind of like country where so much kind of like a somebody popular, kind of like a booming and things like that. And in the near future, the population of Africa might kind of like a boom a lot. Okay, yeah, because the Chinese civilization, like basically the population of China and population of India, are kind of like a somebody the downsizing. Okay, yeah, why downsizing? Sorry, that there is a rain is actually happening here. Okay, yeah. Downsizing means like that ki probably just like within a century might be kind of like somebody the population of the China will gonna get half, as well as kind of like somebody Japan and other part of the country too. India might have kind of like somebody lead in population, but still there is African countries kind of like somebody leading in the population is Nigeria, and it will kind of like give little bit of advantage to the African people is because of that ki when there is a population increase, probably kind of like somebody the industrial revolution other kind of like a factor will gonna increase too, which kind of like increase their productivity and stuff like that, which is really good for their economy and kind of like assembly leading development and stuff like that. Okay, yeah, but still if I'm kind of like looking at the every possible scenario that Africa is a kind of like assembly the industrial revolution actually happened in Africa, the possibility of chances would be almost like a maybe 1% or maybe very less than that. Okay, yeah. If I'm kind of like thinking about the visual point of perspective, then I might see there is a lot of kind of like some things that matter. Like let me give you context. Okay, yeah. If instead of like basically the Africa is kind of like a mineral rich continent. Okay, they have kind of like some coal and kind of like some the iron and stuff like that. One of the really essential thing is coal. Okay, yeah, and there is a lot of coal mine in Africa. Probably I'm not really sure about that, but yeah, there is a lot of coal mine in Africa. Okay, yeah, and in the industrial revolution, there is a lot of coal is actually transport from Africa to Europe for kind of like a, and basically at that time coal was kind of like some really essential fuel for industrial revolution, because at that time coal was kind of like a really essential. Okay, yeah, if they wanted to kind of like burn anything or kind of like melt the metal and things like that, they need a fire. That fire come from coal. Probably that coal is really essential at that time, and mostly that coal is actually come from the Africa or Asia or kind of like something like that, but mostly is this thing from Africa, because Africa is literally close to the Europe and stuff like that. But another thing is that instead of kind of like a something like basically is this thing, the coal was kind of like something available in Africa in very large amount of time, then very large amount of source, then probably it's kind of like a something that key instead of kind of like some of the European kind of like some rich people, instead of kind of like install their factory in Europe, they should supposed to be install their factory in kind of like some Africa. Then they might be kind of like some get a lot of good stuff. What is really good stuff? Cheap labor. Okay, yeah. Okay, you can get very easily cheap labor in Africa, or very means very cheap labor. Okay, another thing is that he coal. Okay, yeah, it's actually kind of like assembly available, abundant in Africa. So probably is this thing that the transportation, the kind of like a time and money would cost to get the coal, but kind of like so easy and so cheap in Africa too. Okay, yeah. Uh, the talent should supposed to be gathered from Europe. Okay, yeah, it's not really that he like basically is this thing that he, but it is not now. Like basically, if I'm kind of like a think about every possible way, it's like basically at that time now. Okay, basically, okay. So the Suez Canal that we have today, okay, that connect to the kind of like assembly, all the kind of like assembly transport, the good transport actually happened from Suez Canal, which not actually exist in almost like 1800th century. Okay, yeah, like basically, if I wanted to go to the Europe to Asia or India, they have to cross the entire Africa and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Now basically what I'm trying to tell you is this thing that the most of the European civilization have kind of like a colonies in kind of like a rest of the countries, like a Britain Empire have colonies in kind of like a Canada, India and Australia and things like that, and they need to kind of like some ship routes and stuff like that. Okay, yeah. Sorry, I was kind of like a bitterly busy on all this stuff. All right, I should supposed to be end here. I don't want to continue this thing. I already made up my point, but still, I don't know. Okay, it's just my opinion. Okay, do not believe in this thing. Do not kind of like stuff like that. It's just my opinion. If you do, yeah, it's the information that I'm trying to tell you is not exactly right. It's not exactly wrong. It's just my opinion, unfiltered. Okay, yeah. So do not seek for this information. If you need this information, go to the internet and kind of like you get. I'm just kind of like providing this my opinion. All right, this is it. I should supposed to be end here, and thank you.